Bemiller, I know he's knowing what he's talking about because he produced the 2004 Olympic champion in that. And he's very well known in the United States about being a very structured coach, having produced a lot of learning material about the pole vault, so he's knowing what he's talking about. And the other guy, is the guy that produced this chart with the pole vault, calling it a biaxial blade, whatever that means. It will be very interesting.
That was his idea.
David Butler. And David Butler, if you like his teeth, it also has a connection to the pole vault. If you like his teeth, show your teeth. Yes. Because his dentist is the Olympic champion in 1964, Fred Hansen, if you remember. So that's David Butler from Houston. And he may be well known among this group also because he's running the Facebook group The Ball, how bamboo, steel and fiberglass changed our lives. So I think he also knows what he's talking about. But maybe a little bit more from the artistic perspective. And so this will give a very good contrast, the structured speaker, the artistic speaker, and hopefully we're going to have fun.
Thank you, Robert. Very good. Thank you all for being here. This is really fun for me. Anybody from Tennessee? Ever been to Tennessee? Been to Tennessee? We're in the southern United States, and I've lived there for 30 years. And this is fun for me because Bemiller is Americanized German. And it's the first time I've been to Germany. And so if you know of any Bemillers, because my father, who's in his 80s, he's like, you have to do this, 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 and track these people down. And I'm like, Dad, I don't have time to do that. I'm going to the pole vault conference. I don't have time. So if anybody can help me out, I'd really appreciate that. This is fantastic for me, and I want to thank Herbert and Dr. Ritzdorf for having us. So I'm sorry I didn't get here 15 years ago and be part of the beginning, because it's a wonderful event and the speaker's been awesome. And I know we've had lunch and we've been here all day, so we're going to try to keep this as light as possible, and we're going to have a little fun. And what we're going to talk about today is we're going to tag team this. Tennessee is a very long state. We're in the eastern part and up in the mountains. If you know anything about the U.S., Elvis is from Memphis, Dolly Parton's from Nashville, and East Tennessee we have the university. So I've been coaching at the university since 1986, and I really liked what you did with the program with the first day, with people giving their reports and giving their reports about their career. And that's kind of how I wanted to start my talk, as an introduction, giving you a short version of my story, because I haven't had a chance to meet a lot of coaches from Europe. So when I was 22, I was hired at the University of Tennessee to coach the pole vault. And Tennessee was a collegiate power back then. Stan Huntsman was the head coach, and he was the 1980 head Olympic coach. And we had Sam Grady and the great 100-meter sprinter, and David Patrick, and Coach Huntsman was one of our most respected coaches. And but Tennessee didn't have any pole vaulters. We were non-existent. We didn't enter a pole vaulter in our conference championship meet. So what he thought we would do is, that's a weak event on our team. We need to bring somebody in and try to improve our performance as a team. And so I was very fortunate. And one of the things I used to ask Coach Huntsman, I used to ask him a lot of questions. And I said, because he coached everything. He coached great distance runners, great sprinters. I said, Coach, what's the secret? What's the secret to doing this? And he said, well, he's very short and very direct. He was a great football player and great athlete. And he said, you get good athletes and don't screw them up. Don't screw them up. and make them believe they can do better than they think they can. Believe they can do better than they think they can. So I was 22 years old, just out of university. I went to Miami University, and when I got there, I was told all this. Well, pole ball's the worst event on the team. And then people would pull me aside and they said, you know, pole ball's really embarrassing. And they're a bunch of goofballs. And so you have your work cut out for you. So at that time, at that age, I was scared to death. I was scared to death because they were paying for my school. This is how I was going to work my way through school. And I was terrified because I never coached at that level. And so I'm like, I got to do something. I got to do something here, and I got to do something fast because we don't have a formal training system in the United States. There's little pockets here, little pockets here, and there's not a formal training system. So our school record was 520 at the time. And then we had a lot of 5 meters, 490s. And this is in the same conference as Mondo's dad. We competed against Greg. And so it was a good track conference. And so I'm like, I have to do something. And Coach Huntsman and Coach Brown took me aside and they said, don't worry about it. We're gonna help you become a better coach. We're gonna train you as a young coach. And they said, who do you want to come in? And so we'll talk more about it in the chat, but they brought coaches in that I wanted to learn from, and they come in for a week, and they sent me to conferences, and really made training part of my first 2 years at the University of Tennessee. And I think it's good to see young coaches here, and it's great to have you here at a conference like this, because I think we learn so much at conferences like this. Even if you learn one nugget, or you meet one new person, it's worth coming and doing. And so we had success. Our athletes got better. And we're going to talk about what became important to me, because I really think as coaches, we not only train athletes, but we have to train ourselves. And we have to develop our own lenses. We have to understand who we are and what lens we see things through, so we can help athletes improve. So I think there's a lot of introspection in coaching that allows us to be more effective. And so my lens is very different than David's. You can tell we're a lot alike, can't you? We look a lot alike. But David and I met many years ago at a conference, and we've been friends for 20 years, and we bounce things back and forth, and we don't agree a lot, and then we do agree a lot. And so when David said, "Hey, let's go to the pole ball conference," and this is what I want to talk about, I'm like, "Yeah, what do you want me to do?" He said, "We'll just talk about your career, and then you can be my sounding board, and you can tell me where I'm wrong, and tell me what you think of it." So we've never done this presentation before, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I think, so my job is to kind of tell my story, and then give him feedback along the way here, and hopefully you'll give him feedback too. So we started, and what was fun was I coached at the university for 20 years, and I was counting it up last night, and I had 10 scholarship athletes and 5 or 6 walk-ons or volunteers. So, and I looked at it, and I thought, I was talking to Martin this morning, I said, that's not a really big sample size. So is it luck? Did we just get the right athletes? But I was happy with my career because the athletes improved, and our school record went from 520 to 598. And we had 2 Olympic medalists out of that group. Tim won the gold medal in Athens in 2004, broke the Olympic record. And then Lawrence Johnson was his teammate in college, so I was Lawrence's collegiate coach from 520 to 598. So he did that in a 4-year period. And so I get a lot of recognition for that, but I was happy that all the athletes improved. So it's fun to look back at that time period and try to figure out maybe why we were successful. And, but I think it's all about lenses, and you have to understand that. And I was taught early on that we all look at coaching through different lenses. And so you will either be scientifically minded, you may be historically minded, you may be nationally or regionally minded, you may do what you do in the nation or region. You may look at a champions model. I want to study the champions and see what they do. You may be new, you may be innovative. I want to do things different than everybody else. And so you really have to look at yourself and look at your training and say, what kind of coach am I? Or what kind of coach do I want to be? And I really did that. I really tried to do that in my career. And I was working my way through law school. And that's how I was paying for school, was coaching for the volunteers, coaching for the university. And so we all have different backgrounds. You know, I look out here, we all envy, to be honest with you, the Americans envy the Europeans because we see you as very, very analytical, very scientific, and very good at those type of things. I can't retrain myself as a biomechanist. I can't do those things. I have to work with the training that I have. So I'm kind of weird. I'm very weird because I have a background in law. So when I use my training in law, it affects how I think about my coaching. So in the law, you have two big areas. You have statutory law and you have common law. And that is similar to coaching because statutory law is concrete. This is what the law is, this is what the statute is. And then the common law has to do with individual cases, how the law is applied to individual people, and how those outcomes come out. And that's very similar to coaching because you have fundamental principles that you have to follow, but we have to apply those to each athlete differently. They're going to be applied differently to each person in each scenario. So I kind of used that strength because I understood that. And the other part of my legal training that I used was we think about precedent a lot. We think about what's the most important case, or what's the most important line of cases, and we have to follow those. And so I use that a lot in my coaching too. I look at things and I say, well, you know, what's the hardest thing to do? What's the highest precedent thing in athletics, or highest precedent in the pole vault? And we like that we look at that and we say we want to win a gold medal because it's once every 4 years and you have to be ready on that day, and you don't get a redo the next year. And so it really fascinated me about what the Olympic champions did and who their coaches were. And so when I looked at the modern era and I looked at 72 through 84 when I just started coaching at the university, I'm like, who's winning medals? Who's winning medals and who's coaching those people? And if you really look at it, so you have this whole world of what's my coaching going to be? But then if you start to narrow it down and look at the precedent, there's only 3 or 4 or 5 coaches you need to really study. So that was my mindset when I was very young, when I started coaching. And so that was different. Back then, you know, it was very hard to get information. You know, somebody would mail you an article or do those kind of things. Now we have the opposite of coaching. Now with the internet and social media, we have the opposite. You get inundated with a bunch of information, and your job as a coach is to figure out what's garbage and what's not. You know, so we have challenges on both sides. So that's a little background on how I developed my lens, and I think it's really important to do that. You know, David and I we have a lot of similarities, but we have a lot of differences. His lens is very historical, and he's going to tell you about that. is very historical, and his background is in art. He's a wonderful art teacher, so he sees it from a more artistic perspective. And so we don't agree on a lot of things a lot of times. But it's good for us to have those debates, and it's good for us to talk about things because I think that's how you boil it down to the essence. The other thing that impacted me as a coach was because I was in law school, and then when I finished my legal training and went out and worked in a firm, I did insurance defense, and 40-person firm in Knoxville. It's all about how many hours you bill. You have to bill hours. So I had to change. I used to see the athletes every day. When I was an assistant coach. But now, because the president of the university and the AD paid for my schooling, and we had good results, and they liked what I was doing, they said I decided to volunteer. I would be a volunteer and give back. And so, but my coaching had to change again because now I only had 2 days a week, sometimes 3 days a week in the evening, and we had to figure out how to do that. And we still had good success. We still had wonderful success. And I coached Tim as a post-collegiate. Tim and Lawrence were two that wanted to be post-collegiates. And so Tim gradually improved, and 10 years later, he jumped 601 and had a great battle in Athens, and it was wonderful. It was a wonderful performance. But my coaching had to totally change. It became very modular. You know, I had to work with the sprint coaches and work with the weight coaches more to say, on these days, they're going to be with you. On these other days, these are our technique days. And so it became very modular, and I became more of a manager, and I would just show up for the technique sessions. So that's some of my background, and we're gonna talk about, David wants to talk about 3 styles of vault. And we've talked about this over and over again. I'm like, Dave, I don't know if this is gonna go, man. Because you and I may see things differently than other people, but I think that's what's great about having a conference, is that you can throw things out there, and then they're fun to talk about, and then you have to decide what's important for yourself. That's the art of coaching. You know, you have all this information, and the art of coaching is deciding how you apply it to your athletes. So I'm gonna let David introduce yourself a little bit.
Okay, is this working? Okay, everybody's awake. Good. I'm Richard Lunching. Would you stand up, please? Olympic bronze medalist, 1996. I mean, I'm sorry, I still get chill bumps. So
yeah, that's awesome.
He cleared the bar at the 96 games. I was a volunteer over at the side. He walked over to me and goes, "Hey, get me a Gatorade." It was great. So, well, I wanted to start out with pathways. So I've been an educator for over 35 years, and I believe that we help children or young people develop a pathway to be successful, not just in athletics, but in life. So I'm going to tell you a little story about myself. I grew up in Indiana, Fort Wayne, Indiana. My neighbor across the street, my dad was a World War II veteran from the Pacific. My neighbor across the street was a World War II veteran. His son was older than I was. We used to play in the yard all the time. They had a side yard, we played baseball. Went back in the backyard about 1965, 66. I was 13 years old. And he's got mattresses stacked up with some bamboo crossbar and a bamboo pole and a hole dug in the earth, and he's vaulting. So he let me vault. I was more go up in the air, land on the ground kind of thing. But it was the first experience I had pole vaulting, 1966. A few years later, 1969, he's in Vietnam fighting for the Army. I'm a high school freshman, sophomore. A few years later, 1972, 71, I started vaulting. My PR was 10 feet. I don't even know what that is in meters. That's so low, we shouldn't even talk about it. His father allowed me to build my first pit in his yard. I call it Fichter's Field, her last name is Fichter. And so, again, in the same yard, I'm molding again in my own pits and tires with strap foam rubber bag, trying to make 11 feet. My goal was to clear 11 feet, and I was going to bend the pole. The problem is that every time I bent the pole, I landed back on the ground. I never made the pit all summer. Never. I don't know why I put the pit there. It should have been nothing, just a box and just pole vault, and I never would make the pit. A year later, a few years later, Larry came back from Vietnam with a Bronze Star and hair down to here, and he was never the same. His whole life, in many aspects, was shattered from those experiences. Me, my draft number was too high. I get to go to college, and I get to go to pole vault. And so here we are, all these years later, and I get a chance to have good friends from all over the world because of pole vaulting. It's very, very strange. But I really believe that we have pathways and we have choices, and we as coaches have that opportunity to change someone's life for many times the better. And through that, we can change their lives through a sport. And to be able to do that is a great privilege. So, okay, that's my little story about myself. Let's go back into a time machine, and let's go back in time. And I don't know how many of you guys study pole vaulting films or pictures or anything, but I have a collection of about 30,000 images from way back to the early 1700s. I'm a sick man. But I'm a believer in that we have to know where we've been before we can go to know where we're going. And I think it's important to always study, appreciate, respect, and honor the people of the past, because that's why we're here. So, the whole theory or theme of today is to take the techniques that the guys used on bamboo and metal and early fiberglass and develop kind of a sequence to be able to use it now on the poles we jump on now. So we're going to start out with a little history of where this came from. Then we're going to show you 3 styles of pole vaulting and why I think one is the most important and the one that really works the best. It makes the poles move faster. And then the third film is basically an experiment where I've taken my college athletes and had them go through this sequence this fall, because every fall I do something different. And this year it seems to be really, really working. Okay? So that's what we're going to go through. Just 3 little short films, a little triptych. But first I need to give you a little bit of language, because there's a lot of different languages here in the 26 countries. So I'm just going to give you some hand signals and show you some things to look for on every video, so that you can start to maybe develop that lens, kind of focus in on some of these things we're talking about. You probably won't agree with it now, or maybe I'm speaking to the choir and you already know what you're doing, and I'm just supporting what you believe. But it's just something that I think you go back and you study a little bit and have some of your athletes do some of these things. I think you're going to have a lot of fun. Okay? Okay, history. Before history, though, let me go to this. So the hand signals I'm going to show you right now, the first one that's important is this. And so this is the signal we have. It's called active pole drop. If you don't have the correct carry and an active tip of the pole moving as you accelerate, it doesn't matter. All this you won't be able to do. Very, very difficult to do. So we have this. We're looking for the tip of the pole. Now, the film, from the historical films, they didn't have an active pole drop because they held about 13.6 on a 16-foot pole, and the weight of the pole on this end helped balance the pole and keep it up. So they never held at the top on bamboo and metal. So they didn't really worry about active pole drop, and that starts to get developed a little bit later. Number 2, elastic. And elastic is connected to a term that I've created called hollow. Hollow is simply that your shoulders are not closed or down. You're squeezing your hand like it's a pimple. You're fully extended. All right? I tell the kids to smell their armpits before they swing. Okay? I don't want them to do it. One kid actually did. It was disgusting. Another one is elastic, and this is kind of the whole thing about today, is that you've got to have movement into the pole, shoulder movement, arm movement, the elbow does bend. You have that movement, you can become the pole. You become one with the pole. I know that's a little Zen-like, but I truly believe that. So the body must open into the bend into the bend. The hips have got to be engaged. So we're going to talk a lot about watching the hips. Once the hips are open, you swing like crazy as fast as you can. So if the body opens up, it moves the pole, it rotates the pole towards vertical. Once the body opens up and hits the box, then you swing like crazy as fast as you can to make the pole move fast. Another technique or thing to watch for is realignment. Now, realignment is essentially that once you come into the pole, you're striking and to get your arms straight and re-hollowed towards the vertical. It's a very quick, violent movement forward, short to 12 o'clock. So in the United States, we have a lot of rowing going on. I don't know why, because there are no canoes around, there are no boats. It's pole vaulting. So you've got to strike the vertical at all times. Everything goes to the vertical, to 12 o'clock. So realignment is a very aggressive movement that I'm going to point out with some athletes here as pole vaulting develops. It starts out to be mini realignment, and then you start to see it more pronounced as vaulters start to take off farther out and later on, through the years. So we got active pole drop, hollow, elastic, the hips, realignment, bending into the bend, creating pole speed, getting the pole moving fast. We don't care how much the pole bends, we care about how fast it moves. And then finally, free takeoff. And free takeoff in the United States is like, you might as well say it in Greek or German. Nobody knows what it is. But simply what it is you're coming off your big toenail and you strike the box. So your body's fully extended, your hips are moving up and forward, and then you strike the box. So when I watch your film, you just start to see the hips move, then the pole hits. That's beautiful and free. That really creates a very powerful position, but you can't do that without an active pole drop. And there's no connection through the ground if you don't have your arms fully extended and hollow. Okay? So there's some things I'm going to talk about in a second when we're looking at the film.
You want to crank it up?
I'm cranking it up.
All right.
We're cranking it up.
This is either going to be a lot of fun, or we're going to set U.S. pole vault back about 15
That's
years.
right.
So you decide.
So, vaulters, back in the day, they used to clear the water, or they'd go hunting and use pole vaulting to get to the field. So they use it in war, in battle, or in the bull ring, or in the circus, or for fitness, developed in Germany, and then starting to clear the crossbar. They used to jump for distance, then they started jumping for height. Early pole vaulting was on wood and bamboo. They jumped off the ground with no box. Usually the early poles had spikes at the end, and then they started digging holes to create a box or a stopboard. But again, when I look at these old films and pictures, I see elastic. I see the arms moving. This is Warmer Dam on bamboo. Jump 15 made on bamboo. I see it in many of the pictures. I'm going to show you a picture a little bit later of a whole bunch of cutouts I made from about 30 different athletics books from the late 1800s all the way to now, showing guys taking off free before they knew what free was. I think this is Nikola from Finland. Left arm is bending, the arms are going up and expanding, the body becomes part of the pole. The hips are engaged, the hips are taking off, and that's key. That sets up the swing. This is George Davies, who set the first world record on fiberglass. Still that same open position. Jim Graham, again, elbow is bent and goes up over the body. Nordvig, early fiberglass. Isaacson, Steve Smith. Isaacson probably had the most beautiful takeoff at the time. Sluzarski, though I do get confused sometimes if it's Bukarski or Sluzarski. It's Sluzarski, yeah. I don't know who this guy is, Guth or something. Take it off a little under, but still elastic, allowing his hips to move forward and up. 4 different vaulters here. Kiliamaki. Maxim Tarasov used to jump over campfires in the woods. Gaffion, I saw him compete against Mr. Tmanchik in '96. Not as elastic as you see, and this is the picture that I found in a bunch of different books, if I can stop it in time, from way back in the 1800s, and these guys basically are all kind of taken off free. Fred Hansen told me when my mouth was full of cotton, after he was drilling in my teeth, well, you know, Dave, we used to like to take off about 4 inches out, which today I believe should be on. But I thought that was very interesting to go back to books, athletics books in the late 1800s, and still see diagrams of guys taking off free. Now we're doing a little bit of film. This is late 1800s, early 1900s France, jumping for distance. And the landing is very important, because you're landing only in sand. Of course, this guy is a goofy footer. A goofy footer is when a guy takes off the opposite foot. And he's shifting his hands, and we're going to talk a lot about hand shifting a little bit later. Cornelius Warmerdam jumped 15 feet like 50 times back in the 1940s. Nice and elastic and hollow, and then this really long, powerful swing. Mondo told me that he swings like Warmerdam. How many kids 18 years old know who Warmerdam was? These guys knew what they were doing. They had to land in sawdust and sand, and so they learned how to make these poles move. Bob Richards, 2-time Olympic gold medalist and 1-time bronze. Jumping on metal now, the poles are metal. The pits are getting a little bit deeper. Gutowski, career was cut short by a car accident. And then we get early fiberglass, and this is Sternberg. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story later about what Vitaly Petrov told me about Sternberg. But Sternberg would hit elastically, the elbow would bend, then he would do a little mini realign, and he would swing like a giant, swing like a gymnast. That was a really beautiful thing. I had coffee at his house in Seattle just before he passed away. It was really special. I was showing him film of my athlete's hand shifting. This is Shaley Zobson at the University of Texas in 1972. I think it was the highest jump in North America at the time. Tip is up a little bit more. He has nearly a free takeoff. Boom, the hips take off. He's elastic, he swings. Might be 555, 552, I think. I can't remember. You guys probably remember. I know Mondo knows. So you should start to develop a little bit of a rhythm of looking at some similarities in the techniques, even though the pole's not bending. Sergei Bubka, I could watch this jump forever. Hits elastically, jumps, gets the hips engaged, realigns strong and fast, swings to the top of the pole. Everybody should be required to wear striped socks when you ball, right?
Yeah.
I'm an art teacher, I have to mess with the color. Sorry, guys. This is great because it's an early, young Potapovich where he hits nice and free and then he realigns immediately off the ground. And so later vaulters, contemporary times, last 10, 15 years, are starting to realign even faster. They don't wait until their toe is kind of pointing toward the box. They realign right off the ground once their hips are engaged. Maxime Tarasov, who's probably the world's most beautiful vaulter of all time, and I'm not saying his good looks. Elastic, realign, both arms are straight, swing long and fast to the top of the pole. And turning early, right, Jim? This is on the internet. This is a great competition. Popovic and Tarasov. Just some beautiful, fast jumps. I don't know who this guy is. I just threw this in there, but this is beautiful. Elastic, realign right off the ground as he initiates the swing. Creates that space to get inverted on top of a bent pole, not catching the bend late. The reason you swing long and fast and realign is to keep the pole bent so you can get on top of the bend, kind of like a surfer catching a wave. Everybody knows who this guy is, Lavellini. Free, boom, elastic, starts to realign right off the ground, creates space, keeps pressure against the pole, swings to the top, turns very early, keeps working through the top of the pole and finishing. You guys get to see these guys jump all the time. We only see them on film. And then there's Mondo Duplantis. Mondo is just one of the last 50 years. Elastic, realign right off the ground, very much like Tavanchi and Lavellini and Tim Mack. He told some other coaches, said he swings like Warmerdam. He likes to drop his knee and swing with two legs. I personally believe that if you study, it's good to drop your knee. There are a lot of guys that did it. A lot. I didn't want to bore you with 50 films of guys from 1970 until now that dropped their knee, but I think it's a beautiful thing and it keeps the pole bent. So that's the historical section, part one. Part two to come. B?
The interesting thing for me, which I really appreciated about David, is that I'm very quiet. I like to stay in the mountains. I like to go to practice. I love to practice. And I have coaches that mentor me. But David goes out, man. He goes out and meets people, and he does his history, and has this huge collection of books, and huge collection of photographs and films. And so it's been fun for me. Our friendship has been fun for me because I get to poach off all that stuff. I didn't have to do all the work to go get it or to go meet people, but I get the results of it because I get to see all the stuff, and it's been really fun for me. He may be saying things a little differently, but I think that's good because part of my lens was I need to make this as simple as possible. I need to make this as simple as possible for my athletes because what we do in the States is a rehab job. If I'm a college coach in the United States, I have to take athletes that are a certain way, and I have to rebuild them. I have to rebuild them and look for their most authentic self. So a lot of what we do is band-aiding or trying to improve what they have because we don't have, at an early age, at the youth age, we don't have physical education. We don't have proper technique and training. So a lot of times kids don't know the basics about running. They don't know the basics about plyometrics. And so we have to be very careful about how we do that. So my teaching is very basic, and I think that's good because we have to teach athletes to react quickly. We can't make it overly complicated. And I enjoy the details, but that's not how I coach. I don't want to coach that way with the athletes. And so I look for very similar things with David. How they carry their momentum through takeoff. Are they fully extended through kick takeoff? Do they move the pole? Do they move the pole as they swing? So, and then I look for a very early hip turn. So I'm looking for the tempo of the ball, and if they have those things, momentum through takeoff, and realigning the pole aggressively and turning early, what I believe works in the ball fits into what he's saying. So it's been fun for me to talk about this presentation. What's next?
Okay, part two. Everybody's still awake, I see movement.
Maybe.
Part two is 3 styles of pole vaulting. Style number 1, hand signal. Block. This is called the big left arm in Texas. You get down there and you get that big left arm and you bend it because you gotta bend the pole. Don't matter how high you go, as long as you bend the pole.
That's how they talk in Texas.
That's how they talk in Texas. They talk like that in Tennessee also. Big left arm, big blocking left arm, essentially that's what it's doing. It blocks the body from being able to swing long, so we end up the body breaks prematurely. You have to break the left arm to get upside down, and you catch the bend instead of big bend, catch the bend late. It's really not efficient, and not, it bends a lot of big poles, but really doesn't work for me, okay? Next one, vertical block. Vertical block is a block that's straight up in the air. Now, it can work. A lot of people have proved it works, but you got to keep pressure against the pole as you swing. You can't break. The problem is a lot of people break early. Vertical block can work especially if you have a narrow grip. So I kind of compare Gaetano as a good example of someone that had movement to the vertical, but it was a narrow enough grip that he could make it work. And it was a beautiful thing. Third is my personal favorite, elastic, or I call it classic elastic, which means that the left arm either bends a lot or it bends a little, but it still bends. And the left hand moves to a vertical line through your hips. If you can get that, that's just enough to get the hips into the jump.
Yeah, so why is that good? Why is that the best?
Because it makes the pole really move while it's still straight. That's a good question, because I would have forgotten to say that. What it does is when you're elastic, it makes the pole start to move off the ground, your hips are moving, and then it bends. And that little split second of pole rotation before it bends is huge. Huge. It puts a lot of power and force into the pole. So you have a guy that's jumping 550, and he wants to jump 590, and get on a 10-pound stiffer pole with a higher grip of fist or 2 fists. They start to take off a little free, and they hit that kind of position. It's a pretty thing, because the pole rotates before it bends. Huge, in my opinion. So, vertical block, to me, block is, a lot of young kids are doing this in the United States, and then they never change, they never get better, they hit a plateau. Vertical block can work, but again, I think you get to the point where you can only hold so high. And I think the one that's best that I've taught and worked with is historically based, because the guy is on bamboo and early fiberglass, metal, were all elastic. And they shifted the bottom hand to the top. Basically, you have 2 top hands. We're going to talk about in a second. So
block's not good.
Not good.
Vertical block works.
it can work.
And we see different variations. We see different variations during a meet with your vaulters, because we know that every jump is a little bit different, and you will see them compensating correct. Like talk about Mondo's prelims, what he said about his prelim jumps. He said, you see my prelim.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that later.
Okay.
Mondo sent me a Facebook message the day after he won European Championships. He said, hey, Coach, did you see my 590 jump? And I go, no. So he sent it to me. I said, all right, Mondo, why did that one work? He goes, I kept the tip up better, didn't I?
Yeah.
Tip of his pole. So that's the one jump where the tip was more active rather than dropping it and shoving it forward. He took off a little farther out, moved the pole a little bit better, got on top of a little bit of a bigger bend, and it flowed and accelerated. And it was really, to me, the sweetest jump in the competition. So,
yeah, and you'll see that too. You'll see that as the bar goes up. You'll see some jumps in the middle of the competition that may be more technically correct, or maybe better, what we think is a better product. And then as the bar gets higher, you'll see the athletes press a little more or change. And you see that in a lot of major competitions. and where the athlete just reacts because every approach is different or every run is different, and they react through the takeoff and through the pull to make adjustments. So if you look at Sergey's winning jump in '88, you know, he overran it and he got caught and he fought through, but it was not a great technical jump, but he reacted so well. And like when I went back and watched films of Tim and Athens, I watched the jumps, and his last jump was a very strange jump for him because he got excited on his final run and he got jammed, but he fought through it because he reacted well enough to have an instinct of how to move the pole, but it was not his best technical jump for me by far. But because of the excitement, because of the conditions, he made it work. But when you start to watch these things, I see what David's talking about. I really do.
Okay, so before we watch film number 2, let me tell you the benefits of elastic. Okay? Creates pull speed rotation, fast jump. So the third part we're going to show today, we're trying to get the kids to have fast jumps always, whether the pull's bending or not. Number 2, allow the hips to be engaged, hips lead the action. You know, Petro told me once I had a guy that was a 2-legged swinger. I took the film before me and I said, what do I do with this kid? He looked at me and he said, David, you American. It's hips, my boy, not knee. Don't worry about driving knee. Drive hips. That was incredibly profound for me. I went back home, and the other thing he told me is to work on the pole drop because the kid dropped his tip extremely early, and so he jumped higher. The more active his pole was, and the more balanced and postural it was at takeoff, and then we just didn't worry about the 2-legged swing, and it was a beautiful thing. Pole angle higher while it's straight, like I just mentioned before bending. The pole takes off. Creates a strong postural power position at the takeoff. The body opens up. All right? The vaulter can swing and catch the wave and get on top of the bend. Not catching the bend late or trying to pull themselves beside the pole, but stay under and behind the pole and swing on top of it. You get on stiffer poles and higher grips, and then finally, everyone was doing it. Back in the 1940s and 30s, and everybody was elastic off the ground. Everybody jumped free. And I had proof of that. If you go back to your old athletic books, you'll see that's where their takeoff point is optimum. So these are all really, really important points to keep in mind when we're talking about classic elastic. Okay, so let me show you the film about the 3 styles. The popcorn is available for part 3. Okay, so there you see blocking, vertical blocking, and then elastic. There's a block, shoulders and head go back, body kind of arches. You're force bending the pole, and that's okay. You bend the pole, but you're not necessarily moving the pole. Sometimes you get really trapped. Blocking occurs a lot of times when people have the grip too wide. There's a vertical block, really good position. Hips are moving, right? The arm is straight up in the air, is nice and hollow. It can work. Vertical block for Sandy Morris. Again, you see that body back, kind of a broken body, shoulders back. And I believe the most important, the most important thing you look at for elastic is, like I show here with old guy from 1936 and Jeff Hartwood, that the poles are the same. So the hand shifting, what they did on bamboo and metal. So here is Buka with Warmerdam. I see similarities, not differences. So that's what I'm always looking for in vaulters and vaulting. I think elastic opens up the hips and gets the hips to take off right up to the center of the pole. So back when I was jumping, it was this drive forward and then go up, and I think the jump should be this way. Opening up, this little drawing I did. I'm an artist, but an abstract artist, not a figurist. So want the body to open up off the ground, Sergey Buka in a sequence. See the left arm moving in line with his hips. not worried about the knee, and then you go back into time in 1960 on metal, and this is Ron Moore. So look at the takeoff. Same position you see with Buka. This is Tarasov on the top, Sergey on the bottom. Again, the same type of positions. Bend the elbow slightly, and then I just took film of these guys in one of the last meets of the summer. What was it, Brussels? There's Barber, one of the Poles, I can't pronounce his name, I apologize. Elastic, Bemiller, which that's kind of a funky jump for him, but typically he's a little bit more elastic and realigns. Lysick, get the pole to accelerate. Sam is unusual, but he's still elastic off the ground. He's got that movement into the pole. Mondo, a little bit under, but realigning very quickly off the ground to create pole speed. And then Moganov.
Wow.
Moganov, when he jumps, he tends to block when he gets a little bit pre-jump out there. But he still makes it work because he doesn't release the pressure.
And everything, the momentum continues. It doesn't slow down, it doesn't reach. The momentum continues through the takeoff.
That's right.
Yeah, and I see it a little differently. I love David's explanation of it, and it's made me start to see the ball differently. But I was always more concerned with, I didn't worry about the bottom hand, because in the States we debate the bottom hand all the time. And I got sick of it when I was very young. You know, the Texas guys were telling us to block it out, and there's a big thing that a lot of high school kids that I would get at the university, their coaches taught them, when Tim was saying, drive into the box as hard as you can. So their takeoff angles are so low and so difficult that my main concern was moving the top of the pole, so I would focus more on the top hand. And so if you watch Morganov's hand there, he takes the impact of the ball, but there wasn't any space between his head and his arm. And so I'm more focused on the top hand and how the top hand moves. And does it take the initial shock and then move back to realignment as quickly as possible? So I didn't pay much attention to the bottom hand as long as it wasn't causing problems. But this has been fun for me to see the distinctions.
Well, and I will say, we've known each other for over 20 years, and when we met at the USA Pole Vault Summit, we've never been, you need to go because it's truly unique. But the great thing about the Pole Vault Summit is that, me personally, I've been able to make friendships through all these years from all over the world. I've been greatly inspired by Andrzej Kaczynski and Dudley Petrov. Herbert Chinga and I became good friends and brothers from different mothers. And then B and I, because we're so close, we're so far away from Europe, but B and I are able to communicate weekly and share ideas and look at films and everything else. And it's created the same type of thing with 10 Mac. So
we're still 15 hours away, but that's close for the States, I guess. Yeah, but we can call each other, see each other. We see each other once a year.
that's right. That's right.
You should come here.
That's right. Okay, so ready for part 3. I can see you're thrilled. Part 3. This is the last part. Right? Before coffee.
Come on, we got my shot.
So let me go back. Let me go back. Studies show that when babies are born and if they start to crawl and then they skip steps to be able to go and walk and run, that later on in life they have severe learning disabilities. A lot of studies show that. And I'm a believer that you have to go through a sequence to teach pole vaulting. Now back in the day, there were kind of 2 types. One was, you taught a kid to force bend the pole and block, to first bend the pole, and then you taught them to be elastic off of that. The other way is to teach graduates they learn to take off. They start out, again, becoming part of the pole. The whole key is to become one with the pole, to become the pole, to make it really, really move. So, Boulder starts out with a fiber nose takeoff, to a fiber head takeoff, to kind of a collapsing takeoff, to a nice full extension as they get their takeoff out. Those are kind of the 2 sequences I'm familiar with through the years.
In the States. Yeah.
In the States, especially, yes. So, what I've done is I had a few athletes that were really struggling. really struggling. And I had a girl that just could not get extended at the takeoff. She would always come in and compress and be real tight and tense. And so one day, I just threw up my hands and I go, you know, Sternberg shifted his hand. Why don't you just shift your bottom hand to your top? And she looked at me and she goes, okay, I'll do it. And Pat Manson was there, and he was sitting there watching this. And she came down the runway. The first time it was kind of funky, she bailed out. The second time, she swung so fast, she got upside down. The pole stayed bent and then gave her body a pop. And we call this drill the pop now and use it. And we both looked at it like, what the hell just happened? It was so dynamic and fast. A few weeks later, we were at an indoor meeting at the University of Washington, and I called Brian Sternberg up. He lived in Seattle. Brian Sternberg had a big trampoline accident in the early 60s after he'd broken the world record a couple of times, broke his neck, became quadriplegic for the rest of his life, and lived many, many years, only passed away just a few years ago. And his mother answered, and I said, listen, I'm in town, I'm a coach, I'd really like to come and visit and take Brian for coffee. And they go, no, he doesn't go out very often, but why don't you come to the house? I came to the house, and by the way, Sternberg and Warmerdam are Lily Pentoff's greatest models, greatest icons. I watched Pentoff get teary-eyed when he asked me to introduce him to Brian Sternberg and to take pictures. He was shaking. It was just incredible. So I go to Brian Sternberg's house, we pour some coffee, I show him film of the girl handshaking, and he goes, why not? We all did. And so I thought, well, maybe I'm onto something here. So what we started to do is to develop kind of a sequence of straight pulling, and then moving the run gradually back, and then being on short pulls, moving the grip slightly up, and then the pulls start slightly bending, but we keep hand shifting, and then we move back a little bit farther, and we grip a little higher, we go a little bit longer pull, everything a little bit, little increments, little improvements, sometimes only move up 1 finger width, and then on back to the competition run. And then we start over, and we go back to the straight pull, and we retouch and revisit problems they're having, and then we go back again. And then we compete. We put a bungee up, and we compete, have competitions from 6 steps, from 8 steps, from 10 steps to 12, and back to 14. When they get back to 14, the guys start to, I don't tell them to hand shift or not. By that time, they're so used to it. They go, do we have to hand shift today? And I go, no. And I don't tell them how wide they need to be. So what we developed is kind of a sequence of working on a pole drop first, so that your takeoff is in a great position, working on keeping the grip narrow so that you can't fight the pole, so that you can't control the pole's drop, and then working on shifting from a narrow grip and on back. Anything about that?
I think it's interesting because it all starts with the grip, and I don't think we pay enough attention to it. I think we let athletes get away with too much with their grip, and it leads to problems. So I think this is a way to make it open their mind to doing things a little bit differently, and they don't want to change their grip. They don't want to adjust. And this is a good way to get them to adapt to that, and it's a good way to learn how to extend through the takeoff. So you're teaching that. You're teaching that full extension. You're teaching that way to be hollow off the ground, and you're sneaking up on them. You're not.
Well, yeah, we're kind of being sneaky and creative about it, so they have a lot of fun because they're challenged and they're having a lot of fun. But it just, I think, teaches such great things and great positions. Now, the thing that's been really strange is in the past, we spent August and September working on pole carrying, pole drop drills. And then when we started jumping twice a week, we straight pulled. And then we worked on backing up a little bit, slightly bending, and then we started hand shifting. But the amazing thing is in the past month, jumping 2 days a week, the guys don't have any run-throughs. There's no bailouts. I say move the grip up. It's like, okay. and they're moving grips up. And it's none of this drama. It's really been amazing. So let me show you the film, and then we can talk a little bit more about it, and then you guys can take a break. And this is this is things in working. We're still experimenting. The first thing we do is the old, what I call the Petrov slow motion walk. We do this left-handed and right-handed and skipping, and then we do creative ways of doing it where we have the kids have to make up their own slow motion walk. And I've shown this on the internet. I'm going to show it at the end. So basically it's just 3 steps with the pole always active and pushing the pole vertical. And then after we do this a few times, we do what we call the top hand carry, where the pole accelerates and you have to chase the pole. Important to be accelerating into the rhythm of the drop. If you don't do it right, you'll feel it right away because you won't be able to take off free. The tip will hit too early. You'll hit off balance. And then we have a narrow grip. So before you saw a ghost hand, we hold the hand here, and then we go to a narrow grip takeoff. So these are some still photographs of some college freshmen. This is a college, just 1 year out of college, learning to take off and trying to hit a really nice, beautiful open position off the ground. It really, again, we want to create a relationship with the pole so the pole feels like an extension of the body, not a dead weight. We want something that's a tool that they're very, very used to using. So here is the ghost hand where they grab it with the bottom hand. Here's the top hand accelerations. And we don't count steps, they just go according to the feeling of the drop. And by the way, these guys are by no means perfect, but they're still getting better and developing. So again, we do top hands, narrow grips, ghost hands where you grab it with the bottom hand as you flip the pole. And we even have different releases where they grab it with the left hand and release with the top hand. So we're just trying, again, to be creative with it. One of my athletes told me that when I retired from being an art teacher, I threw all my creativity into coaching. I think they're right. This is decathlete. It's been 5 years. So again, we're looking for acceleration of the feet as the tip accelerates. And when you get the timing right, I've had girls that weigh 125 pounds using a 490-200 and are able to do it. Then we go to the runway. And we start out with 6 steps. We straight pull and shift the hands and swing. I think I had 3 guys jump 13 feet, 4 meters, doing this from 6 steps. You're seeing all different variations, but again, we're trying to work on pull speed, really accelerating to pull the vertical. The standards are all the way back, and then we just have a competition.
So how do you think that's going to transfer when they're from long run, or when they actually vault? I mean, have they gone back and vaulted yet?
Yeah, they have, and we'll show it at the end.
What's that like?
It's working, yeah. So this is the pole pop that I talked about a minute ago, where they shift their hands. They swing really, really fast. The pole stays bent, and it kind of jumps out of the box. And so they hit the top of it. It just gives you that little hip pop. It's really, really a great way to see if you're storing energy to pull. So now we're going to a slight bend of the pole from 8 and 10 steps. A little higher grip. Shifting hands together. Some of the kids don't shift so well. They'll shift maybe a fist or 2 apart. But what I'm excited about is that it's fast jumps. They're working on the swing and being able to trust, open the body at the takeoff, swing really, really fast. And it's been a really good rhythm as I've seen them learn. Now, 3 of these guys are college freshmen. This is an athlete from Japan who's a post-collegiate, and the African-American kid is a post-collegiate. But these are all, to me, very, very fast, pretty jumps. They're all developing in the past month and a half. And then when we stop shifting, we work on being elastic off the ground and realign. And then try to pop the hips to the top. He turns out of it. And then we work on the kind of the classic drill of coming down, not swinging, getting the top part of the pole to whip as if you could do a front flip or throw a front flip. So those are the positions I'm trying to look for. It creates some space. They're elastic to enter the pole. The hips are engaged. They begin realigning off the ground as they initiate their swing. Both arms are straight as they're swinging through the bend. That's the positions that I'm seeing most of the kids being able to hit. They're not perfect by no means. And then we try to get creative, especially on rainy days, and have them create their own plant, like walking plant, or here in Puerto Rico, we evolved it into the ocean. Something that Greg Duplantis and Helena told me was that Greg built the pit in his backyard, but then he didn't go out there like, you know, a puppet with Pinocchio and control Mondo and say, okay, I'm going out to coach you 3 hours a day. What Mondo would do is Mondo would run in at 7 years old and go, I'm going to go out and pull the ball. And Greg would go, okay, have a nice time. And he'd go out, and Mondo would jump. Did a lot of straight pull, a lot of impersonating of great straight pullers. But I think it's important to have time for your athletes to play pole vault. Playing pole vault means that they have a task, and you walk away and back out of the way and get out of the way. So there's some days where I have practice where the kids will get started. Okay, today we're doing 12 steps. Pick the pole, pick your grip, no hand shifting over the bungee or over the bar. Then I get my notebook and I go on the other side of the track and I sit down and I take notes and drink my coffee and I watch. And the kids coach each other. They have some of the best workouts when I get out of the way. So I think the older I get, I've discovered that the less I say, it's the better, because I want the kids to feel. Earlier presentation, they talked about the gymnast said he went over to try to feel what he had just done. I film in practice, but I don't show it to them because I want them to feel it. Then I send the film to them on Google Drive at night. They study it, and then they make comments, and we talk about it the next day. It's become a really good learning rotation of feeling first and seeing second. Because when they see it, they'll look at too many things and they'll get them all confused. So that's what we do. Part 3 is over.
It's fun for me to talk about this stuff with David because I'm very pragmatic. And the athletes I've worked with are older. So I'm trying to be very efficient. And I'm not going to try to think about 20 drills. I'm going to try to think about the 3 drills that really work. And it's fun for me because I think working with beginners, you actually get a better eye and a better experience than maybe working with the athletes that I work with. So it's always fun to talk to David about those things and bounce ideas off of him. But I'm not going to try to make 100 variations off every drill, but I just started working with a group of young ladies this fall, and it's amazing to me. I don't know why, but the kids don't have a concept of rhythm. American vaulters, we're basically punching into the ball, but they don't have it much rhythm through the takeoff. So I've started using the closer grip drills with the girls and talking and working with them on the rhythm of the takeoff, and we've had really good results. So it's something to consider. I mean, it's a throwback to history, but there's a reason why world record holders were using it then. There may be a reason for us to consider it now. You kicking us out?
Well, I say,
you know, his birthday is today. David's birthday, Mondo's birthday, my son Greg Hall's birthday. Good job.
so thank you, Jim. Thank you, David, for this very impressive, very individual and very artistic presentation.
Was it autistic or artistic?
Take it as it goes.
Thank you for letting me use Vanna White. I just Vanna White. you know.
Yeah, it was perfect, you know. He needs sometimes a correction, sometimes an explanation before he lifts off, and it really worked perfectly for me. It was very impressive, not only describing your view on the technical development over the ages of the pole vault, but also how to apply things that have been working all the time, still today, not following every trend, but trying to find the truth about the pole vault from the past, from the history, and presenting it in that impressive way as it did. Thank you very much again. But I think there may be questions to you from those pole vault experts sitting here in the room, and maybe you start.
I had the pleasure of seeing Mondo and Moguno fighting it out. And one of the things I wondered about is Mondo's pole drop compared to Moguno's. And you being super coaches, and I think you have maybe different perspectives on it. Would it make sense, and would it improve Mondo's planting of the pole if he was more like Moguno? I would love to hear the different answer.
We've watched Mondo since he was little, and I've known Greg because we're in the same region of the country, so we've kind of watched him grow up, and like he just texted Dave a minute ago, and so we've had fun watching him, but I agree with you. Mondo's going to get better because he drops the pole too early, and he holds it, and it pulls him out of position. And so doesn't have his full extension through takeoff. Some are better than others, but he knows it, and he knows he's working on it. Now, you studied the Russian more than I had.
Well, and I'll piggyback off of that. Mondo called me about 2 years ago, out of the blue, and he said, "I need help with my pole drop." I said, "Okay, I'll send you some films, you watch them, and you call me back." Then I called Greg right away, and I said, "Listen, I don't want to step on any toes. Mondo wants me to work on his pole drop." And Greg said, "Mondo knows what he needs. Mondo runs the show. Mondo needs pole drop, he's going to do it." So for the last couple of years, he sends me film, and I will say, "No, it's at 30 degrees, it's 8 steps out, it needs to be a little higher." And then you know what he would do the next meet? It's 5 degrees higher, it's 10 degrees higher. So it's not perfect yet, but remember, the kid's 18 years old. He's still learning to jump. I will say something I really love that Greg told me about Mondo. I said that Mondo seems to feel the pole better than just about anybody. He just has a great sense of what the pole's doing. And Greg said, well, most vaulters fight the pole, Mondo dances with it. And I think that's a very, very true statement. That the true artists in this event are the ones that make it look effortless and beautiful and dynamic. On the other end with Morganov, I think it's beautiful. I said years ago that you could drop it from 60 degrees from 6 steps out, and that's what he's doing. Sometimes he hits it right, sometimes he doesn't, but it's there, and you can see what it does when he hits it right. So yes, Mondo's going to improve the more free pole drop. Morganov's going to improve when he gets more consistent with it. Yeah.
Yeah, good. I agree. And I do want to say, I didn't say it, that was 15 years ago. I think the new wave of vaulters, the younger guys, are so excited. And they're getting this idea of, it's kind of a combination. It's kind of a combination of Sergey and getting both together. And they look good. They look good on the ground and on the wall. So it's exciting. Everybody builds on the previous level. So.
Well, I think if I may add something to the discussion, that Mondo has one big problem, that's his speed. He's amazingly fast. He's a lot faster than Morganov. And it is so hard to control the free falling or almost free falling pole during that speed he has. And I think the problem we can see technically compared to Morganov is an explanation for this. I think many of us have seen the YouTube video of 10 years of Mondo.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it yet, interesting this guy is because he, at the age of 13, 14, I'm not quite sure which age he was, he started imitating other Walters. And he was imitating your Jason.
Perfectly, yes.
Yeah, with a dropping knee and a free swing with this aggressive hip, and he was imitating the guy, I forget all his names.
Huffman.
Huffman.
Yeah.
He was showing the Huffman roll at the age of 13, 14. And this is something that's perfect that you can do with your athletes, let them imitate other vaulters. Try them to feel how a real vault feels for another vaulter, and they will learn a lot from it. So this is, I don't know the family background exactly. His father was a big pole vaulter.
Greg was a 580, 585 vaulter at LSU, and they live in Baton Rouge where LSU is, and his brother was a starter on the LSU as one of our best college baseball teams. And his brother is a star on the baseball team since his freshman year. And his mom was a great athlete at LSU. So it's been fun watching him grow up. I called Greg a couple years ago, and I said, Greg, I know he's going to LSU, but if he doesn't, will you call me? He said, well, if he doesn't go to LSU, he'll come to Tennessee. And I was like, okay, but I know he's not. I know he's going to LSU.
Well, one more thing you see up here, this is a little postcard. I worked 3 years on a new pole vaulting book. It's 240 pages and counting. It's filled with some of my collection of vaulting images and a whole bunch of text and a lot of madness. So I hope you'll be able to see it when it comes out, probably next year. So it's called the Violent Ballet because I believe the pole vault is very much like dancing. So.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I really think this is going to be a very interesting book filled with your knowledge, filled with your impression, not only artistic impressions, but also having learned from the best pole vault coaches all over the world. And what you made out of it must be a very interesting thing, for sure. Are there more questions for the moment? Then I think if that's not the case, we'll have the chat a little later, where we're going to discuss some more questions around pole vaulting in the United States, in Europe, what we can improve for our sport. And I'll see you then. What's the schedule? 5:30. So we'll be back at 5:30 in this